you make reference to a place called the House of Hell.
Yes.
Just give us the Reader's Digest version of that.
So what the Zetas did is they kidnapped citizens if they thought that there was a possibility that they would extract a large amount of money from their families for ransom. So we interviewed a guy who had been a kidnapped victim and was held in one of these safe houses where, at the time, El Canicon, the guy who attacked the consulate, would keep several kidnapped victims in this house. And he, if I remember correctly, he went into that house and he said there was like 20 other victims in that house. And they would all receive beatings with this. It looks like an oar, but they designed it specifically for beatings, and they cut holes into it, punch holes into it so it'll be more aerodynamic, and they beat these people every single day so that their family members could hear them going through the pain and say, pay the ransom or else, we're going to eliminate your family member. So,
hey gang, welcome back to part 2 of episode 195 with my good friend Leo Silva. I hope you listened to the first part yesterday, because now we're going to get into the guts of this conversation to talk about a group called Los Zetas, the violence that's associated with them. They brought violence in Mexico to a whole new level. We also want to get into, after that, some of the things that Leo's doing after retirement from DEA. One of the things I want to point out to you is the book he's written. I highly recommend this book. It's called Reign of Terror. You can get it on Amazon. I read this thing in just a matter of hours, riding on a plane between Orlando and Dulles and back. It's a quick read because it's so interesting. Things that I thought I knew about the drug traffickers in Mexico. I wish I'd read your book years ago when I was in special operations. Of course, you didn't have it back then, but very, very eye-opening. And then at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Mexico today. So if you remember from yesterday, we finished up, and Leo here is assigned as a group supervisor. That's a first-line supervisor for DEA, McAllen, Texas. He's working in a HIDA group. That's the high-intensity drug trafficking area, which is basically a task force, right? He told us yesterday, if you didn't hear yesterday's episode, go back and listen to it, because he talks about some of the cases that they were working on down there and how they were able to target some of these organizations based off of nothing more than a nickname and a phone number, and how that developed into an international major criminal investigation. And that's what DEA does. I love it. There's things that were classified back then, and they might not be classified now, but I'm still not going to tell you about them, and I don't think Leo will either. Trust me when I say that accusations have been made over the years by traitors who have accused the government of being big brother, listening to all Americans and without Americans' knowledge. That person who is now in Russia, I'm not going to give him the benefit of mentioning his name on my show, but I hope if he ever comes back to the United States, they put him under the prisons, because he destroyed so many good things in this country, where he was saying that the Americans didn't know that agencies were running amok and doing things on their own without the government's knowledge. None of that's true. It was all done in the FISA courts, the Foreign Intelligence Secrecy Act, with judges' written approval. And it was one of the most successful programs that we've ever had here in the United States that led to protecting our citizens. But because of one jerk wanting this 5 minutes of fame, the whole program was destroyed. So, boy, and that's what you call Murph going off on a tangent there, Leo. I'm sorry. Certain things still tick me off to this day.
Yeah, I get it.
But we're in the year 2008 now. Leo's the group supervisor there in Allen, Texas. He's already done several years in Guadalajara. And he decides that, I like to say that life wasn't exciting enough. And he raises a hand to go back. Where'd you go to the next time?
I went back to Mexico in northeastern Mexico, in Monterrey, Mexico, which is rather close to the border. I mean, it's a 2-hour drive from McAllen, Texas. So it's pretty close, and it's a major city in Mexico. I think right now it's the second largest city. Back then it was the third largest city in Mexico. So, wow. So it's a very modern metropolis, high level restaurants and everything you can imagine. I mean, it's a beautiful city, and I couldn't wait to get down there. And you know what? The work was waiting for me when I got there.
I know it was. So, and Leo ends up spending the next 7 years in Monterrey and ends up retiring out there. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. There's so many things that was going on down there. You are now what we call the resident agent in charge, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And where's your ASAC at? Is he in Mexico City?
It's in Mexico City. At the time, I was working for the ASAC. His name was Joe Baeza, and the regional director at the time was a good friend of ours, Dave Gaddis. Dave Gaddis was the regional director of North and Central America at the time. So
Yeah, well, I had Dave on the show here. We were young ages together in Miami back when AD got shot, and he's got a book out that's fantastic.
Sure. Yeah.
And Dave is just a hoot to talk to. I had a great time talking to him here on the show. So Monterey is also, it's a high-end city. It's also known to be one of the most beautiful places in Mexico, right?
It sure is. Yes. It's surrounded by the Sierra Madre mountains, and there's several mountain ranges there. And it's beautiful. I mean, you have all sorts of hiking and just all sorts of activities, outdoor activities you can do down there. And like I said, high-end restaurants and nightclubs. And if you enjoy music, whatever type of music, I mean, which I did, I love music, and as a former musician, it's got everything.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful city, very tranquil at the time until
At the
these
time.
guys showed up.
And who are these guys?
So in yesterday's episode, I talked about the Zetas, and the Zetas started off as a security detail for Osiel Carnas Guillen, who was the head of the Gulf Cartel. And these guys were comprised of former Special Forces Mexican soldiers who had either deserted or retired from the Special Forces. And they were now serving as Osiel Carnas Guillen's bodyguards. And Osiel Carnas Guillen got arrested in, I believe, 2003. And after that, there was kind of a vacuum in power. And at the time, the Zetas sort of started seeing the opportunity for them to take over everything. And you had a guy named Heriberto Lascano, who was in charge of the Zetas at the time. And his number two, his lieutenant, was a guy by the name of Miguel Treviño Morales, Z40, who was one of the most bloodthirsty guys that you will ever come across. I mean, when I was in Guadalajara, I thought Ramon Arellano Felix was the baddest man on the planet. But he does not compare to this guy. I mean,
Wow.
This guy is just, he's not from this world. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think in your book you said that Charles Manson can't hold a candle to him.
No way. Not even close. Not even close.
Wow. And this is, I'm recommending your book to everybody. Just be warned. It's very, it's not overly graphic, but you'll learn what was actually taking place there.
Right. I tried not to make it too graphic because it's just people will lose interest. But even so, as much as I tried to tone it down, there's no getting around
Right.
the gruesomeness of what these guys did.
And I don't mind it because Javier and our presentation, we show a few graphic photos, and it's not that we're trying to pretend like we're some kind of tough guy. It's because we want the world to know that the violence associated with narcotics trafficking is absolutely real. And the level that the traffickers have taken it to, especially Los Zetas in Mexico, it just reached a whole new level.
Absolutely. I've said in prior interviews that these guys were pioneers in violence, in promoting violence. These were the first guys to ever show somebody being tortured on video and posted on social media. Back in the day, I think one of the only platforms was YouTube, maybe, and they were the first guys to post people being tortured, and they put it on YouTube. And now everybody's doing it, but these guys started that fad, and they had no problem doing it, and it was just a way to get more people to see what they were capable of doing, and to spread more fear throughout Mexico.
You mentioned Osiel Cardenas. When he was arrested, was he the head of the Gulf Cartel?
Yes, he was. He was the head of the Gulf Cartel, and he's the founder of the Zetas.
Okay.
He's the one that created the concept.
And so now with this power vacuum, the Zetas decide, hey, we're going to be the boss, right?
Right. So there was a struggle. I mean, the Gulf Cartel and the Zetas were at the time, the Gulf Cartel still wanted control. You had Osiel Cardenas' brother, a guy by the name of Tony Cardenas Guillen, who was in charge, but he was not as strong a leader as Osiel Cardenas. And these Zetas are very opportunistic people. And when they see an opportunity, they're going to take it. And they saw a little weakness. They saw a crack in the armor, if you want to call it that, in the Gulf Cartel. And they said, we're going to exploit it, and we're going to take over everything. And that was what their goal was, and they eventually did it.
And it wasn't like they walked in and said, hey, we're going to do a takeover of your company. Here's $1 bazillion in cash. That's not how they handled it at all, was it?
No, there was no negotiation. They just went in and did it and started killing members of the Gulf Cartel and installing their own people there. They created this big fracture between the Gulf Cartel and themselves, and pretty much they ended up taking over all of Mexico, pretty much.
Yeah. Taking over the Sinaloa cartel, the Arellano Felix brothers in Tijuana.
The Sinaloa cartel tried to come in and take over the plaza in Laredo, in Nuevo Laredo. and they took on the Zetas, but they couldn't. And the Sinaloa cartel eventually abandoned that battle and just went back and stayed in their own lane and left these guys alone. But they couldn't overpower the Zetas. These guys were just too powerful and
Wow.
too savvy.
These guys, are they just straight out drug traffickers, or are they involved in other criminal activities as well?
They're one of the first organizations to start expanding their methods of obtaining income. They started kidnapping people. They started extorting businesses, prostitution in the streets. They controlled all that. Everything that generated money, they started taking control of. I mean, we had some people from Washington, D.C. come visit us in Monterrey. And there was a guy that used to sell these masks for wrestling, like lucha libre, and there in Monterrey. And a lot of people from D.C., I want one of those masks. So we knew this guy, and we'd stop him on the street. Hey, man, we want a couple of masks for our people that are coming down from Washington, D.C. And one day we went to see him, and he wasn't there. And we started, hey, man, where's the mask guy? I said, oh, no. The Zetas came in. They started wanting a cut from his profits. Here's this poor guy on the street that's just trying to sell these masks to make enough money to take some food home to his family. And they're extorting him too, So everything that generated money, they had their hands in it. I mean, kind of like, it's almost kind of like comparable to the mob in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a business that's lucrative, they're going to come in and they want a cut for protection. And if you didn't pay their extortion fee, well, you'd get a second visit, and they'd show you pictures of your wife and your kids going to school, and they say, if you don't pay, this is the last time you're going to see your wife and kids. And if they didn't pay a second time, or they didn't listen, well, your business mysteriously caught fire, or you'd get kidnapped and never seen again. So this was their method. And they started taking over not only Monterrey, but all parts of Mexico in that method.
How did that change the tranquility of Monterrey as well as other places in Mexico that were very nice locations once Los Zetas came in? I mean, was anybody immune from their?
Nobody was. Not even the United States. Not even the United States Consulate. In my book, I think it's the third or fourth chapter, I talk about, it's chapter 4, how we were not even immune to it.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, and I think I know the reason, they launched 2 grenades at the U.S. Consulate, shot up the building, and that was the beginning of what was a long, long battle between us and the Zetas. I mean, basically, you don't mess with the U.S., man. And they came and they attacked our building. Fortunate that there was nobody there at the time. It was after hours, but they still did it. And they wanted to send a message to us. And we got the message, but it also sent a message to the public. It sent the message that, wow, if these guys are bold enough to do it to the United States Consulate, the government, where do we stand here? Where does Joe Blow on the street stand? I mean, if these guys are going to go after the U.S., man, we have no hope here. And what happened in that era is a lot of people that had the means started moving to Texas or other parts of the United States to avoid that violence.
Yeah.
So it just generated fear. And that's why I named the book Reign of Terror, because they actually reigned with an iron fist, and terror was their method of advancing their goal.
Whew. And boy, they did. I mean, the level of violence just escalated to a point that you think it's calmed down. I don't want to get too far ahead here because I want to talk about Mexico today here in a little bit, but do you think it's calmed down any?
To a certain extent, yes. We're starting to see a little bit more violence down there in Monterrey again, but not to the level that it was back then. This was just, wow, it's unprecedented. And I'm talking about people throwing victims off of overpasses, hanging them from overpasses and stuff like that in public. And it was just a terrible time for everybody.
I like the way you said it in your book that after they launched those grenades and shot up the consulate, they woke up the sleeping giant.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And you know what? In all the instances that I talk about in the book about Don Ware and Enrique Camarena, and they made the mistake of taking on the U.S. government. And in other interviews that I've given, I said the beginning of the end for the Zetas was them attacking the U.S. consulate, because you just woke up a sleeping giant, man, and we're not going to go away. When my time is done in Monterrey, there's somebody else that's going to come in, and they're going to have the same goal, and they're not going to stop. So that was their mistake. That was the beginning of the end for them.
Right. If you don't believe that, you look back, Kiki was killed in 1985, and here we are in 2025. And the criminal investigation is still open. And we just saw RCQ recently, Rafael Cara Quintero. It's easy to get in acronyms when you work for the government because that's the way we talk. But you see that, I mean, that has been actively pursued for all these years, 40 years. And that just gives you hope. I mean, that Javier and I attribute one of the reasons for us surviving in Colombia working against the Medellin cartel was the legacy of Kiki. The traffickers saw that the United States was willing to shut down the border. And if you think about it, if they can't get their dope in the United States because we're the largest consumer country in the world of illegal narcotics, then they're not making money. And that's not what their goal is.
Right.
So, again, I'm getting off on a tangent.
It's like you said earlier. I mean, you take away their money and they're not going to be happy campers because money is their power. And that's what they're after.
That's what they're trying to get across to everybody. So if you would, there's so many examples in your book about how you guys pursued these guys, and you worked with different parts of the Mexican government that you learned to trust.
Right.
But then when they were successful, they got pulled away and you guys were able to come up with alternatives. Can you just tell us a little bit about those groups that you work with and why you trusted them? What made them different than everybody else in Mexico?
Right. Well, one of the first groups we started working with was a special operations group with the federal police. And we started working with them because they were not affiliated with pretty much, they were separate from our special investigative unit that we had vetted and all that stuff. Now, our special investigative unit introduced us to these guys because we only had 3 or 4 guys down in Monterrey in our special investigative unit. And we're going to go after the mastermind of the attack on the U.S. Consulate. We couldn't do it with 3 or 4 vetted guys. So we were like, well, what team can we use to go after this guy, man? And they said, well, we have a special operations team in the federal police. And I said, are they affiliated anyway with your bosses in Mexico City? He said, nope, they're not. So that was the difference. They came down to Monterrey and they sent a team of 30, 40 guys to hit El Canicon, the guy who was a mastermind behind the attack on the consulate. And they did it. And they ended up seizing like 9 tons of marijuana at this warehouse that the guy was at. And after that seizure, I remember we went out there after the place was secured. Our agents, in Monterrey at the time, we went out there and it was pretty eerie, man, because it was like 4 or 5 in the morning and it was raining cats and dogs, man. And we said, this is 9 tons of their dope. They're going to be coming here pretty soon and trying to take it back or shoot us all and get us out of here. So we called the army and said, hey, can you give us some backup? Because this is what happened. And they sent the team out there. So now we had the army and the federal police at this warehouse. And at the time, we had 2 locations. We had the warehouse and we had a house that we knew that he was staying at. And when we hit the warehouse, we had just missed him. And he went back to the other house we identified. So we sent a team of federal police and army to that second house. And then all hell broke loose. They saw him coming. They started this huge shootout. Canicon breaks through it's like something out of a movie, man. He breaks through the garage door in an armored vehicle, shooting it out with the army and the federal police. They go down the main drag of Monterrey, which was Avenida Constitucion, where the consulate is located. And our team of agents were just coming back to the consulate after the seizure because it was already secured by the army. They were already loading the dope and taking it away. So we come back to the office. I mean, as you know, we have to report. So I had to report to Gaddis and say, hey, this is what's going on, boss. And as we're coming back and walking into the consulate, we hear these gunshots again, fired at the U.S. consulate. Boom, 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 boom. And it's El Canicon going down Constitucion, shooting again at the consulate. And man, all hell broke loose in the consulate also. I mean, they sounded the alarm, the duck and cover drill, and it was chaos, man. And I'll never forget, we got our weapons that we're not supposed to have, and we went to protect the consulate because we didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, there's just no idea what's going to happen. We don't know if they're going to attack us again or what. So I go to the front door with an FBI companion of mine there at the office, and we're at the front door, and there's this guy. It was kind of cool that morning. It had stopped raining already, and it was kind of cool. This guy with a jacket, and he's got his hands in his pocket, and the FBI guy is right in my ear, and he's saying, "Watch his hands, watch his hands." And we didn't know if he had grenades in his pocket or what he was. Like, we just didn't know. The fear of the unknown, man. And I had my finger on that trigger, and I was ready to smoke him. And he pulls his hand out. He's like, I'm just here for my consulate appointment. Like, dude, can you not hear the sirens going off, man? Get out of here, man.
You were this close.
I think a little closer than that. He doesn't know. He had no clue what was going on, man. And here's these sirens going off and people running
Wow.
around all over the place. And he was just there for his consulate appointment, man. And he's like, man, get out of here, dude. Get out of here. So that happened. I mean, he came and took a second swipe at us. And that's when the gloves were off, man. And not only that, but in the coming weeks, El Canicon, since he saw that the military went on that operation to seize his dope and attack his house, he started a campaign against the Mexican army, and he set up camp. He set up a bunch of Zetas out by their base,
Mm-hmm.
and as soldiers would leave on the weekend for vacation or taking leave or whatever, and get into a taxi, which were controlled by the Zetas, all the taxis, and he ended up kidnapping and torturing 9 soldiers because of their participation in that operation. They tortured them, slit their throats, carved a Z on their foreheads, and threw them in the bed of a river there in Monterrey. 9 of them, 9 young men. And that was his message to the army. And at the time, like I said earlier, it was really hard for agents and Mexican entities to work together towards the same goal. But when that happened, the general called our office and he wanted a meeting with us and the FBI. And we went and we met with him. And he said, gentlemen, I think we have a common goal. He said, this guy just killed 9 of my soldiers. And I know you guys are very good at the intelligence that you generate. So we want you to help us avenge our 9 guys. And we were glad to do so because they attacked our consulate. And now they were in the game and we had a common goal, like I said earlier. So that's when we started working with the army against these guys. And I tell you what, there was some really talented analysts that they had there. Just gave us a lot of insight that we didn't know also into their organization. And it was really good to work with those guys.
Wow. Was that a first of the army approaching you folks and wanting to work together?
As far as I know, yes. I mean, we had an army up in Mexico City at the high level that were talking to Gaddis and the ambassador and other folks and other agencies. But on the ground level like this, planning an operation, I don't think that had ever happened before in Mexico, as far as I know. Maybe so, but I don't think so. I don't recall that ever happening. But these guys called us and they wanted to meet with us and they wanted our help. Yep. And that was a difference maker.
Yep. I'll tell you what, that interagency cooperation, he's off.
Right. Yeah.
Now, you guys ended up working with some other Sedena.
Yeah, Sedena's the army. So we work with the federal police, the special forces, federal police, and the army, and we did some good work for a couple of years. And eventually, somebody noticed. And a lot of these guys, when you do a good job, you get promoted. And some of those federal police got sent elsewhere. And the little group that we worked with in the army, the same thing. They got promoted and they got sent to other places. And the people that came in their place did not have the same motivation that these guys had.
Mm-hmm.
So now we had to look for a new team. And lo and behold, who comes out of the blue is SEMAR, the Mexican Marines, the Navy. They had this special group that were trained by Navy SEALs in the United States. And there was a group of 40 of them, and they were chomping at the bit to get into the fight. Yep. And at the time, we had never worked with them. Never, ever. Even when I was in Guadalajara, with Jimmy Martinez, Jimmy had a guy that he worked with on the Navy, but it was all maritime stuff. It was not ground operations.
Yeah.
So we had never heard of the Marines doing ground operations. And we said, well, what do we have to lose, man? We have nothing to lose. Let's try them out. And these guys are trained by Navy SEALs, man. So we went ahead and did our first operation in December of, I believe it's 2009. And in my book, the chapter is called Game Changer because it changed the dynamics of enforcement operations in Mexico from that point on, because these guys did not mess around. I mean, we gave him our target package. We said, this is the target. This is where he's at. We know he's there because we're monitoring his phone. We know that he's there, and we'll tell you that he's there at the time of the operation, and we'll monitor his whereabouts. So they did not mess around. We gave them the package, and within 24 hours, they were there.
Wow.
And they were on it, and the rest is history, man. They got that target. A week later, they did an operation at Arturo Beltran Leiva in Mexico City, and they took him out. Mm-hmm. And the rest is history. I mean, these guys from then on were the go-to team for DEA and other agencies like ICE and FBI to conduct major operations in Mexico.
I remember hearing about the Mexican Marines, and I was shocked because how far is Monterrey from the ocean?
It's pretty far. I mean,
yeah,
the closest is I guess the Gulf of Mexico there in Matamoros and Brownsville, Texas, and it's pretty much landlocked. Mm-hmm. So Monterrey is a good, couple hours away from the ocean. So it's not anywhere close.
Yeah, but the successes they were having, I remember still being on the job, and all of a sudden it was everybody wants to work the Mexican Marines. They're
Absolutely.
trustworthy, they're well trained, they're trustworthy.
Yes.
That's a huge plus, especially working in their country. Just you make reference to a place called the House of Hell.
Yes.
Give us the Reader's Digest version of that. What is that all about? I mean, obviously this is Los Zetas.
Sure. So what the Zetas did is they kidnapped citizens if they thought that there was a possibility that they would extract a large amount of money from their families for ransom. So we interviewed a guy who had been a kidnap victim and was held in one of these safe houses where at the time El Canicon, the guy who attacked the consulate, would keep several kidnap victims in this house. And he, if I remember correctly, he went in there into that house and he said there was like 20 other victims in that house. And they would all receive beatings with this. It looks like an oar, but they
Mm-hmm.
designed it specifically for beatings, and they punch holes into it so it'll be more aerodynamic. And they beat these people every single day so that their family members could hear them going through the pain and say, "Pay the ransom, or else we're gonna eliminate your family member." So he went through this, and he calls it the House of Hell because it was hell. It was hell on earth. Listening to people being tortured. There was a woman victim there that was raped repeatedly. He said you could smell the blood in the house. You could smell the fear. When we interviewed him, he said, "To this day, I can't sleep, man. Even with medication, I can't sleep." They beat him so bad that he lost hearing in one of his ears. So this was typical for the Zetas. They would have a house, they'd keep all their kidnap victims, they'd call the family members, collect ransom, and let them go sometimes, and sometimes they wouldn't let them go. Sometimes they'd kill them, or they'd accidentally beat them to death,
Mm-hmm.
which was the case in one of the description that our witness gave us. He killed one of the guys. He was lucky enough to get let go, and his family paid like, I don't know, it was like $1,000,000 or something like that, which I don't know, at the time was worth half $1,000,000. I don't remember. But it
Mm-hmm.
was a large sum, and they let him go. He suffered 4 broken ribs, permanent hearing loss, obviously PTSD. And the Zetas had numerous houses like this throughout Monterrey where they keep victims. And it was kind of like a warehouse of victims, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And it was all hell on earth.
Yeah, the way you describe it is it just sounds putrid. The smell and the sounds, and you tell us, or he told you a story about one guy's family didn't pay the ransom on time, and they
Right.
beat him, and then everybody else had to listen to him slowly
Yes.
die from his
Right.
injuries.
And they left him right there on the floor, and he just died. And this guy, when he's telling us his story, he had to pause several times to get a hold of himself, and just very traumatic. Ever since I left Monterrey, I don't know what happened to him. I know he's still
Mm-hmm.
down there, but yeah, it's terrible. And he's one of numerous victims in Mexico that had to go through this.
So you stay in Monterrey until 2015,
Correct.
and then you decide to retire. How come you decided to retire? Is it just your age, or what was it?
I was done. It was, after going what I went through in Monterrey and 28 years and just dedicating myself in the last 5 years of my career to this, was done. I was burnt, and I'd had enough. And I really looked hard at it, and it's 28 years, and I said, "That's enough, man." I just, at the time, my granddaughter was, I don't know, 2, 3 years old, and I said, it's time, man.
Yeah.
So
When you're in Monterey, was your family with you? Was your wife with you? Or she was back in Texas?
for part of it, Monterrey became so dangerous that if you had a family, people that were not of adult age, they had to leave. So it
Mm-hmm.
became an adults only post. So if you had kids, you had to make arrangements for them to go to school in the United States or something.
Right.
So a lot of us, not only myself, but a lot of us, their families left Monterrey, and a lot of us stayed behind. So I stayed behind for 3 or 4 more years after that.
Jeez. There was, I think I got this right. Did I read a story where they arrested one of the main guys who was your neighbor?
Yeah, that's a funny story, actually. He was the plaza boss for the Beltran Leyva organization. And what it is, he didn't live there. He had one of his girlfriends living like not even a block away from my house. It was my house, you cross the street, and there's another house. And behind that house, that's where she lived. When he got arrested, Army knew about that house. So they came and they swarmed the area. And my wife was going, I don't know, she was going to a gym class or something, and she opens the door and sees all these soldiers, and she loses it. She calls me, "Hey, there's all these soldiers." I said, "Just go back inside and don't come out until I tell you that it's okay." So yeah, it was really close. It was within walking distance from my house, and I had no clue
Mm-hmm.
that she was even there. But this plaza boss who had been looking for her was at times right there, and I didn't even know it.
That's just the way it is. So your wife, you didn't tell her everything. Has she read your book?
Well, she kind of lived through most of it, so she doesn't really have to read much of it. She lived through it, so
Yeah.
yeah, she knows.
But it's like you said, I think yesterday you said that we don't tell our families everything.
We don't tell them everything, we tell them what we want them to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to scare them.
Yeah, and my mom talks to me about she read my book, and she's like, I had no clue you were doing all this. I thought you were sitting behind a desk. And, I said, well, there's no need for you to know. So
Right.
I never told her until she read the book.
Yeah. That's our book. And when the Narcos series came out, my oldest son came to me after he watched it. He's like, Dad, you never told us about all this stuff, did you? So when you left in 2015, what was the status of Los Zetas?
The Zetas, Miguel Trevino had already been arrested. He was arrested in 2013. And we had, at the time, after he got arrested, his brother took charge. But again, you have that vacuum in power. Miguel Trevino left, and his brother was also violent, but not as violent as Miguel Trevino. So he was a little weaker leader. And at the time, right before I left, we had some really good information as to his whereabouts there in Monterrey. And we were close to getting him. And unfortunately, I had to leave. And maybe, I don't know, a month after I left, he was captured. And I said, man, I wish I could have been there for that. But yeah, so that started the demise of the Zeta organization.
And so here we are in 2025. Is Los Zetas still a threat?
No, they fractured up to the point where they're not even called Zetas anymore. I mean, it's called Cartel del Norte. You have another fractured fragment called Zetas Nueva Escuelas, Zetas New School, Old School, or whatever. And it's just fractured so much, it's hard to tell. But they're nowhere near the level of what they were when they first started. These guys that are out there now are not special forces. They're not trained as well as the original Zetas were. You got pretty much gangbangers on the street that are now calling themselves,
Yeah. They like to copy other people instead of coming up with their own stuff. So you've been retired for 10 years. I'm telling you, listeners, we're just scratching the surface of the things Leo was involved with down there. I mean, it's just case after case after case. It's running and gunning every single day for months and years at a time. So you got to read this book, because I'm not covering a lot of it because I want you to read this book. But you're well known down there. There's not a whole lot of DEA folks in Monterey. Did you ever feel after you retired any threats? You don't live that far from the border. I think McAllen's like 6 miles from the border, right?
McAllen's, it's about 6 miles. And Monterrey, like I said earlier, it's a 2-hour drive. But no, I never did. I never felt that. I made a lot of friends down there. I still keep in touch with a lot of those guys. Once I retired, I started working on the concept of the book. As I said earlier, I majored in English in college, and it was always my dream to write a book. And I started writing Reign of Terror, in part because I want the public to know what not only myself, but a lot of DEA agents across the world do on a daily basis. And because there's always this narrative, when you think of Mexican cartels, you think of El Chapo Guzman and the Sinaloa cartel. But nobody hardly ever talks about the Zetas or Miguel Trevino or Heriberto Lescano. So I wanted the public to know, hey, El Chapo is not the only game in town, man. You have these other guys. And these guys were actually trying to kill El Chapo. So I wanted the public to know who these guys are, what else goes on in Mexico besides El Chapo Guzman. And that's one of the motivating factors of writing this book.
Yeah. So do you think, and I want to talk a little bit more about modern day here in a few minutes we have left, do you see that the drug situation and the violent situation in Mexico is better than it was, or is it comparable, or is it worse?
It's comparable. I don't think it ever really maybe stopped or subsided for a little while. But right now it's at a point where it's getting out of control. There's no law enforcement entity to enforce the laws over there anymore. When the president Andrés Manuel López Obrador took office, he had a totally different philosophy than what President Felipe Calderón had when I was working down there. Felipe Calderón was fight fire with fire. And when AMLO came into office, his strategy was, let's give them hugs, not bullets.
Yeah.
Which goes entirely against what we were fighting for, So, and not only that, but he instructed the Navy, the Mexican Marines, who are our number one go-to agency down there, He says, you guys are not going to do any more inland operations. You guys go back out to the ocean where you belong. So he kind of handcuffed them.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, he handcuffed DEA. Also, one of the things that I found amusing during all this time that AMLO was in office is that DEA agents will no longer have diplomatic immunity. Well, guess what? You can't take away something that you never had. So,
That's right. If I remember correctly,
that didn't hurt us too much.
only the head of DEA had diplomatic immunity, and I'm not even sure he had real immunity. He just had a black passport.
Right. I mean, we had black passports too, but it's just for sure we didn't have diplomatic immunity. So
yeah. I'm a big opponent of AMLO, and if you ask him who Steve Murphy is, he's not going to know. I know, but I've done a lot of interviews on different TV networks, and I would take a shot at him at every opportunity I got because I think he's either the most naive president they've ever had in Mexico, or he's the most corrupt. And I really think that second part is the true part of it. But I looked at some numbers here because I was curious, and I was doing a show last night talking to some people, and we always hear about the people who just disappear in Mexico. And I thought, well, how many is that? And the most recent number I can find is in excess of 115,000 people, Mexican nationals, have just disappeared.
Right. And I think that's a conservative number because, I mean, Mexico is a big country. And every state has its victims. And I think that's a very, very conservative number.
Well, and I read one article that said, and it was a human rights group that estimated that for every one person that's reporting missing, there's 5 that are not reported.
Correct.
Because they fear retaliation from the government or the narcos or whoever.
And the one that is reported, they're pretty much told, just go mind your own business and let us do our job.
Yeah.
And don't bother us. And nothing is ever done.
It's
nothing
outrageous.
is ever really done. Yeah.
And so just to give a little credibility to, well, first of all, in 2023, I found this number. 29,872 people disappeared in 1 year, in the year 2023. That equates to 81 people a day disappearing.
Yeah. And like I say, Murph, I really think the number's conservative. I think it's more. It's more. I mean, I think in my book, if you read one of the chapters, there's a chapter in there where, and it's actually the chapter about Victor Avila and Jaime Zapata, where the plaza boss says he didn't have a date for Valentine's Day, but he can pick anyone he wants and just say, I want that one, and bring her over here. And they'll do it. And they'll get some girl off the street and she'll never be seen again.
Yeah.
And that's commonplace in Mexico. And nobody is ever going to do anything.
Outrageous. So, and just to, give a little more support to AMLO, and that's the acronym of Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the past president of Mexico. So when he became president in 2018, the official number, and like Leo said, these are not accurate numbers, but the official number at that time was 53,000 missing people. 4 years later, in 2022, that number had grown to over 100,000. And those are numbers that the government is kind of admitting to. Well, then I read where he commissioned a study, and he came up with all kinds of little excuses about, well, these people aren't really missing, or we found this percentage of people, or this people were a certain percentage were listed on the list twice. I mean, all these things to try to save face for everybody. And at the same time, he's letting all the murderers and the thugs and the narcos and everybody else just run amok down there and do whatever they want to do. And then he wants to bitch at the United States and tell us, we don't have a drug problem, you have a drug problem.
Exactly.
But you know what? He is right to a certain degree on that because we have the demand. Exactly. If we could get rid of the demand, the supply would dry up, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And you know what? It's kind of a double-edged sword for people like AMLO and who have that philosophy. And yes, it's true. There is a huge demand here. But what I like to tell, people that like to talk politics about Mexico is, so let's talk about the demand in your country. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, what about this demand for weapons? You're always talking about, the weapons are coming from the United States. I said, well, you know why? Because there's a demand for it in your country.
Yeah. Because
the cartels want them and they'll pay for them and they need them. There's a demand there. But what is your country doing to stop that?
Yeah.
Zero.
Yep.
They're not doing anything. Zero. So it's like a vicious cycle, man. There's a demand for drugs over here and there's a demand for weapons over there.
When Javier and I were in Colombia back in the early 90s, you get to be friends with a lot of the Colombian police officers, and just like you had a lot of friends there in Mexico. And if you're not out on operations in the evening, sometimes you're just sitting around talking. It could be family, it could be soccer, whatever the thing is. But inevitably, it would come to, why are you here? Why are you as an American here in our country? And you exactly. Say, well, I'm invited by your country to help provide assets to help fight the war on drugs, which is the biggest misnomer the government's ever come up with, war on drugs, because it's not a real war. So it would inevitably lead to a conversation where, well, if you guys would drive the cocaine here in Colombia, do something about the labs and all that, we wouldn't have a problem in the United States. And every time they look at you and say, if you guys would quit asking for cocaine, we wouldn't have clean labs here in our country. And they won. They're absolutely right. They would win that argument every time. But I also found another number. AMLO is trying to say the number is not nearly what it is. But since 2006, a human rights group reports that more than 50,000 unidentified bodies have been uncovered in Mexico. Well, law enforcement, we call that a clue, right?
Yeah.
So it's amazing what that man was saying. And I'm hoping that Claudia Sheinbaum, the new president, I'm hoping she'll do better. We got a little encouragement when she said she was going to sign troops to the Mexican border with the U.S. She extradited the 29 drug traffickers, including RCQ. And I think I read an article the other day where they're talking about extraditing another group of wanted criminals from Mexico into the United States. Right. I mean, we don't want to get into a Fidel Castro situation with the Marielitos, where not only did he let people leave, but he sent us his criminals and the people from his mental hospitals.
Right.
Which led to a whole new problem. But it's really ridiculous what's going on down there. The I can't even say the word, the naivety being shown by the government of Mexico.
Well, I think it's just a part naivety and part denial, because just recently, talking about missing people, there was this mass gravesite found in Jalisco. And the president came on and gave a press conference and said that it's not true, that it wasn't really a gravesite, that there's no proof that it's a gravesite. And if it is, that nobody's come forward and given an official report saying that one of their loved ones is missing. And and you have people there pulling out jawbones from the dirt, human jawbones, and she's saying that it's not true. Is that naivety, or is it just denial?
Yeah.
I don't know, but
or is it payoffs?
Exactly. So
unbelievable.
I mean, here you have, evidence on film showing that there's human remains in this place, and she just refuses to admit it. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
It doesn't sound like things are going to get any better under her rule down there. There's one thing I want to get your opinion on, because Javier and I were invited to go to Mexico to speak and do the Escobar presentation. And I think this was before COVID. And they wanted us to come to 5 different places in Mexico. And I'm not comfortable going to Mexico, to be honest with you. And so finally we agreed that we would go to Mexico City only.
Right.
And we never asked for protection detail when we travel around the world. But this time we said, we want a detail that we select, but they pay for. And the promoters in Mexico City agreed to it. And of course, then we contacted the DEA office down there, and it's old friends. And they're like, don't worry, we'll have our armed protection detail pick you up at the airport. You'll be on duty at the hotel with you. And they were going to take care of us. Well, when you go through our agent to book us, the promoter has to pay a 50% deposit up front. Right. It wasn't 3 weeks. Our agent called back after we agreed to do it. He said, you guys just got canceled in Mexico City. And we said, well, heck, we haven't even been down there to tick anybody off yet. What happened? They were already getting death threats that it was going to be the Mexico City Arena, which seats 15,000 people. And they said the threats are coming in that they're going to blow up the whole arena and kill everybody in there, including Penn and Murphy. So obviously we did not go. We still got paid because the deposit was down. They don't get their money back if they cancel.
Right.
But the whole point of telling you that story is that I talk to people all the time that, including my former co-host here, who I love like a brother, but he likes to go to Cancun every year on vacation. I like Cancun. It's nice. The food's good. You get in one of those all-inclusive places and you're pretty well taken care of. But what is your thought? Is Acapulco safe? Is Veracruz, the tourist destinations in Mexico, in your opinion, are they safe for American tourists to go to?
Well, Cancun is still, there's still, the tourist area is still a safe area. There's areas outside of Cancun that people have ventured into that are not. And right now, Acapulco, I would definitely not recommend anybody to go there right now. It's a mess. It's chaos. Veracruz, forget it. Don't even try to go there. You still have Baja California, which is safe. Some parts in Sonora, San Carlos, Vallarta is still rather safe. Acapulco definitely would be off my list. I would not want to go there. And Cancun, you just got to stick to the tourist area. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of organized crime down there. I mean, not only narcotics trafficking, but you got these armed robberies and just local crime that is also out of control because there's no enforcement. But just if you stick to the tourist locations, you'll be okay. Mexico City, I'd rather be in Mexico City than Monterrey right now. But even then, Mexico City is a dangerous city. It's one of the largest cities in the world. So there's still parts in Mexico that are safe.
Mm-hmm.
But just travel with caution. Stick to the tourist areas.
Yeah. Do you remember a story several years ago where some gunmen came along on jet skis? I think it was Cancun, and just strafed the beach with machine gun fire.
I saw something like that, and I don't know what that was about. I don't know if it was a fight between two organizations going on there, but yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and there's violence in all these towns, but a lot of it is local
Right.
robberies and local crime. So, yeah.
It just makes me think there's too many other beautiful places in this world to go visit. Yeah, I'm sorry that I don't feel safe in Mexico. I'll never go back. My oldest son and his family, he's a doctor, and he gets together with several couples every year, and they go on a vacation somewhere. A few years ago, he called me and says, this year we're all going to Mexico. And I'm like, the hell you are? He said, even in his mid-40s, he's like, Dad, you're my dad, but you can't tell me where I go. So we had a little discussion back and forth, and he said, well, where do you recommend I go? And I said, go to Colombia. Oh, man, he's like, I can't believe you'd say that to me, everything you went through. And I said, well, it's different now. So long story short, they went to Cartagena, and they went to the Rosario Islands and fell in love with the place.
Cool.
And then our oldest daughter, she went with some friends. They went to Medellin and Cartagena. And I mean, I would go to Colombia. I've been in Colombia twice this year already.
Cool. Nice.
With different groups. But man, this has just been an eye opener. I appreciate you being open and transparent about everything you're telling us and telling us the truth. It just shows the dedication of the people that DEA hires and continues to hire. Javier and I, when we were talking to the trainees earlier this week, I told him, I said, man, I'm so jealous. Javier and I are jealous of you people because we know what you're getting ready to experience, and it's going to be an adventure of a lifetime. And I'm sure you feel the same way we do. I wouldn't trade any of that for anything.
Never. No, people ask me all the time, would you trade that for something else? And I'll tell you a quick story just in closing. When I was in my last semester of college, as I said before, I was a musician. And one of my dream bands that based down here in Texas, they needed a keyboard player to go on a U.S. tour. They said, come on and tour with us. And then this is a band that I looked up to and I just admired so much, and it was my dream to play with them. And I told them no. I said, man, I'm in my last semester of college, man. I came this far. I want to finish. Just come and tour with us. And when we're done with the tour, you can go back and finish. I don't know if that would have ever happened, man, but I told them no. And I ended up staying in college and I joined DEA. But I often wonder what would have happened if I would have gone on that tour. Maybe I wouldn't have become a DEA agent. Who knows? But I'm glad I made that decision, and I have no regrets, zero regrets at all.
Well, you might have been making up some of those songs that glorify the drug traffickers down there. What do you call those?
Those are narco corridos.
Yeah, corridos.
Yeah.
Well, listen, everybody, one more time. This is Leo's book. It's called Reign of Terror. I highly, highly recommend this. You can get it on Amazon. That's where I got it. And Leo's actually mailing me an autographed copy, but I got the Kindle copy there on Amazon. I will post it on the Game of Crimes website, so there'll be a direct link. You just go on there, and it'll take you right to Amazon. You can find Leo, if you're looking for more information, on Instagram at Leo Silva, SILVA_author. You can find him on Facebook at Leonardo Silva. You can find him on TikTok at Reign of Terror, the name of the book, and also on LinkedIn at Leonardo Silva. Well, I forgot to ask you, other than being an author, what is it you're doing in retirement now?
I can say that I'm a chauffeur and a bodyguard for my granddaughter that's in middle school.
Yeah, I like it.
So
I love
that
it.
keeps me pretty busy, man.
Absolutely.
And she's sitting right over there.
That's called priorities. That's getting the priorities straightened out, right?
Leo,
I think that I speak for everybody that's listening to this when I say thank you for your service to our country, to our government, to the citizens of the United States, as well as the people in Mexico that you helped out. You are a true hero. You are an American patriot. I'm glad you didn't follow up on your musical career and you came over to the best drug enforcement agency in the world, premier law enforcement agency, as far as I'm concerned. 100%. But also thank you for telling us all your stories. Thank you for writing this book. You're in the process of writing a second book now. Is that right?
That's correct. I'm halfway done. I'm hopefully have it out early next year, Lord willing.
And I think you told me it's going to be a series of short stories.
Correct. That's correct.
So you want to keep an eye open for that, everybody. Leo, brother, God bless you for everything you've done. It's been fantastic to have you on the show. And for our listeners, I want to say to you, thank you so much for coming back every week. As I said earlier, if you haven't checked us out on YouTube yet, do me a favor, go over there, type Game of Crimes Podcast in the search bar, hit the subscribe button, listen to some of the episodes, hit the like button, and even feel free to leave me some comments. I finally found out how to find the comments on YouTube in the YouTube studio. You talk about teaching an old dog new tricks. I'm that old dog. But
We are, man.
yeah. And I want you to keep coming back here. But you want to keep coming back here too, don't you? And why is that? Because this is where you come to play the biggest, the baddest, the most dangerous game of all. And that's what we call the Game of Crimes. God bless everybody. We'll see you next week. Leo, bless you, brother. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on.
What a pleasure.